Hey, hi, hello. You are listening to UW Comedy Hour on Rainy Dog Radio. UW Comedy Hour airs every Saturday at noon, available on rainydawg.org. If you can't listen in at noon, go to UW Comedy Club's YouTube channel to see older radio episodes and full performances from members. To hear more, you can follow Rainy Dog on Instagram at rainydawg. UW Comedy Club is the best and only stand-up comedy club at UW. To hear more from us, including performer highlights, show schedules, and meeting links, follow us on Instagram at UW Comedy Club. We have meetings every Wednesday at 6:30 where there is absolutely no experience required. So slip into something sexy to grieve to grieve your husband who died of a sudden and unexplained heart attack, leaving you to inherit an incalculable amount of money and join on in. Today in the Knot Studio, we have a two-wheeling, rough-riding cowboy king of the asphalt, Jaden.
Hey, hi, hello. How you doing?
Look, we've all got to get a brand going, and I guess I landed on that. Just like I was
It-
building your brand into a cowboy thing. I don't know. I know you have a motorcycle, and
yeah.
that's about it.
hmm Yeah, I like that intro. I think it suits me well.
I gave Jane a little WWE spin because the running joke of her trying to overthrow Comedy Club is very funny to me and will continue to be funny to me long before it's not funny. Sorry to out you about this, but how is it being a freshman during the now times?
Yeah, living through major historical events. Um I guess the easy answer is it sucks, but like looking at it from a more positive point of view,
Mhm,
I'm experiencing university in a way that it really hasn't been experienced before.
mhm,
And so that's pretty cool. And now that I'm fully adjusted to Zoom life, I'm actually
mhm.
starting to kind of enjoy this rhythm of rolling out of bed and I'm in my lecture space
Yeah.
already. Like I went to my TA class, like eating an enchilada with my shirt off. Like that's not going to happen next year.
No, there's
Uh,
some freedom there.
mhm.
I found that not needing to schedule in bathroom breaks or worry about my phone or laptop losing charge if I do too much or not having food and not having enough time to buy food on campus, like those are all such good quality of life upticks.
Mhm. I'm really excited going forward with this to see how they incorporate the lessons we've learned this year into
Mhm.
future years. And hopefully, university life will only get easier after this.
Hopefully, yeah, you're doing it the hardest way first.
hmm
So, what got you interested in comedy club? Or let's start with comedy in general.
Yeah, I've been fascinated with comedy like my whole life. It's my favorite genre by far. As a kid, I didn't like horror movies. I didn't
Mhm.
want to watch drama. I mean, action is kind of okay, but it was always comedy. If I had any
Mhm.
choice at all, it was that. And I really just love listening, telling jokes, laughing. That's what life is for me.
Mhm. What made you want to start performing comedy?
Well, I got really into stand-up comedy. I had seen some of the like mainstream or whatever, but
Mhm.
when I discovered that like Comedy Central is just getting random people off the
Mhm.
street like up there to tell stuff, I was like, "Hey, this sounds kind of fun."
Mhm. How'd you find out about comedy club during the now?
Yeah, it was an email around August of last year, I think, for the
Mhm.
Dog Days event. No clue what the fuck a Dog Days is. And I was going through the events, and I remember some of them was like how to set up a bank account, like getting interested in the philosophy major or whatever. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I probably won't go to like any of these. But then I
Mhm.
saw like a comedy club thing, or it was a school comedy show or whatever, and I actually
Mhm.
thought it sounded pretty lame. I was like, a school sponsored comedy show. How good can this be? So I actually didn't even plan on going to it, but my roommate, when I moved in, he was like, "Hey, I'm going to this comedy thing, over Zoom, of course.
Mhm.
So it's not really going anywhere. You want to watch it with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll watch it with you."
Mhm. Well, we're very happy to have you. And I think you mentioned before that Render did a great bit. He's an older comedy club member. He did a
hmm
bit where he was TAing a class on cucking.
Hmm. Yeah, it was the first set of the night.
Hmm.
Like
Oh
his
yeah.
first PowerPoint slide was welcome intro to cuckoology, theory of cuckoldry or some shit. And
Mhm.
it was just you can say this at like a school thing. Like I'm coming out of high school where I was getting in trouble for like cussing like with my friends in the parking lot.
Shit.
Like we can do this.
Mhm.
And so I was hooked from then on.
It's still like I still get caught in some places where I'm like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to use a swear here." Not that like I do it in front of teachers or PIs, but I'll find myself like doing it around TAs and I feel like I'm towing the line cuz it's such like a removed concept now that like we're not allowed to swear. And I also worked with kids for a long time, so it would just get like and everyone I've talked to who worked with kids would see this too, that it just all got bottled up. You just had to
Mhm.
pour it out somewhere. A little bit rough. Who are some of your favorite comedians?
Some of my classic favorites have got to be Robin Williams, Jim
Mm,
Carrey. I really look up to them as comedians,
mm,
and I try to use them as inspirations for my comedy. But my
mm,
comedy is kind of a lot different from theirs. I grew up also watching a lot of like Daniel Tosh and
mm,
Anthony Jeselnik, um, and so I think my comedy kind of trends more towards theirs.
gotcha. Yeah, it's kind of a hard question because like how you write comedy is so distinct to you, so it's a bit hard to like parse out exactly what influences lead into like the types of jokes you find funny
Mhm.
or like the way you use language. And you can always fall into the danger of like if you look into any site where it's like here's how you write comedy, generally the first thing they tell you is don't follow like a step-by-step plan, don't follow it a strict outline, don't try and follow a map because like yeah you can write like joke book jokes, but there's a difference between like that and like something that's like more tailored to you, something that like you can
Mhm.
perform well.
Yeah, stand up it's an event. It's a
Mm,
real show. You shouldn't just be getting up there and telling. Ideally, I think in my mind the best stand up comedians are when you don't ever tell when they're transitioning to new jokes or
mm,
whatever. They're just up there talking and telling stories and
mm,
everything they're saying is just funny.
yeah. You mentioned Comedy Central before. Have you watched This Isn't Happening?
One of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Oh, it's so good. For context, This Isn't Happening is it was a show on Comedy Central and they posted it like in bits all on YouTube where they had a host, Ari Shafir, and then Roy Wood Jr. They'd pick a theme for the night and have different comedians tell like true stories based on that theme. So one of them's like filth, drugs, family, like vague stuff, and you can get just some really crazy things happening.
Hmm.
I think one of my favorite ones from This Isn't Happening is Bus People.
That doesn't come to mind off the top of my head.
Okay. Uh, Someone travels across country in a Greyhound. The Greyhound people fight some good old boys in a parking lot.
I may
Just
have been one of
skin
those good old
masks.
boys in the parking lot.
Oh, just a cameo role. A cameo role.
My favorite one is there's a girl up there talking about her story with drug addiction, and she ended up, she was smoking crack or something, and she figured out that if she drank her piss after smoking crack, it would get
Meth
her
Pete.
high again. Meth pee. Yeah, she was smoking meth, not crack. And that was so funny to me. And the craziest thing is that's in Portland. And like I grew up
Mhm.
like outside of Portland. So it was like
I know, I really like that one. I think she was like, "Yeah, I was doing a show and this guy gave me what I thought was a bump of coke and I ended up just snorting meth. And after that, I was just addicted to meth."
Mhm,
Cuz that's how it works. But, you can turn a lot of things into comedy and like I think that's something about this where like if someone else had told that joke, I don't think it would go over very well if because there's just some
mhm,
things that are like so personal for you that you can't really make up that experience. And if you did, it
mhm,
wouldn't hit.
mhm.
What kind of material do you find yourself writing? Are there topics you go back to, things that you keep hitting?
Yeah, I think very much that the comedy I want to write is a lot different than the comedy I end up writing. Um, which is fine because, as you know, as long as it's good material and I'm putting it out there,
Mm-hmm.
anything I perform, I'm proud to put out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say my comedy usually isn't for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't consider myself a highly offensive comic, but like, I've had a lot of people tell me they either love me or they hate me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like to do, and this isn't all my jokes, but I like to do some satire where I talk about things that maybe you're not supposed to joke about or whatever, or I
Mm-hmm.
talk about hard topics. And I think one of the awesome things about comedy and satire comedy is you get to talk about hard things, things that shouldn't be joked about,
Mm-hmm.
air quotes. And you can bring awareness to those things. You get people talking about those things, and it
Mm-hmm.
humanizes those things.
Yeah. It's all about like you have to have a really deft touch when you do things like that because it's so easy. Like I've seen a lot of people just say some heinous shit that's like not a joke, just a statement of heinous shit and they're like, "What? It's satire." It's like you have to build it to be more than something or you risk having it being taken different ways that you don't mean.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's something as a comedian that, I've been guilty of falling in that pit before.
Mm.
And that's why some people have been like, I kind of don't like you. It's like, it's okay.
It's also like a practice thing. Like you started
Hmm.
like actually writing comedy like this year. You're not going to
Hmm.
be perfect at it immediately. It's not. I think, like I mentioned before in a previous episode, everyone thinks they can do improv. Everyone thinks they can do comedy, but when you actually like sit down and try to do it, you find that like it takes a little bit more effort than what you think it does.
Hmm. You have like legit writing sessions and you've got to
Hmm.
like dedicate time.
Exactly. And on the topic of like the comedy I'm writing isn't the same as what I want to be writing, I feel that 100% because I'm like, in my opinion, I think the best kind of comedy comes from like a held belief, something that's internal, something that you might even be like vulnerable about. You have to put yourself into it. Uh, Basically, you have to like be honest about something, which is dangerous and kind of scary because like if once you make yourself vulnerable, you can't take that back, and you open yourself up to like having people, you know, make fun of that vulnerability or use it against you, and like trying to like find the right things and the right way to make jokes about like those deeper held things is difficult and takes time and practice. And I don't like doing things that take time and practice.
Yeah, don't we all? And I think that that's one of the things that drew me towards stand up too was
Mm,
I was kind of a class clown growing
mm,
up, and I was never afraid to make fun of myself.
mm,
I'm willing to put myself down for the sake of the bit, for the sake of pushing that joke.
mm.
And that's something that stand up really rewards.
Yeah. For better or for worse, it really rewards it. It's you talked about Robin Williams earlier, but there was an article that this is getting heavy quick. Sorry guys. Happy Saturday. There's an article that was written after he passed about like why so many stand-up comedians kill themselves. And it's basically like when you put on that facade and you're like, this is how I get people to like me, it's with my comedy, you're not able to be like real with other people, you know? Because like it's almost cliche to say comedy is a facade, but it is. All performance is in a way, but in this way you're
Hmm.
like performing authenticity. You're performing yourself. I think
Hmm.
it's a Jon Stewart quote where it's like I'm horribly mangling it, but something along the lines of like stand-up comedy is a test of how well you can authentically be yourself in front of other people. And you have to like
Hmm.
mediate that.
Right. And it's really tempting when you get up there to perform to tell a lie and
Oh yeah.
to reinvent yourself. But the real comedians know that that doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
and you might get jokes to land sometimes like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not sustainable.
Exactly. It's super tempting to be like, I'm a fat woman. It's super tempting to just go in on that and like hit those same jokes that everyone has made all of time. But like, first of all, that might get a laugh then, but I won't feel good doing it, and it won't be anything new, and it won't be like authentic or worth it, you know?
Right. You have to put comedy out there that you're proud to put out
Mm-hmm.
there. Especially in this day and age, everything's forever. Once you
Yeah.
post it, it's out there.
Horrifyingly, everything's forever. I I'm still weirded out by the fact that like it's kind of common for employers to like stalk you on social media before they hire. I feel like there should be like a layer of privacy there. Like if I want to I went grocery shopping today and I think I put that like I'm buying coconut milk dressed like a dykey Rambo. If I want to put that on my Instagram because I think it's funny to say I'm buying coconut milk dressed like a dykey Rambo, I should be able to do that without an employer seeing it.
hmm Yeah, I think also that we should just have like a solid age minimum for social media. Like
Mm-hmm.
all these kids out here wilding out on Instagram and Snapchat, it's just like ruining the world.
It's yeah, it these not to get boomer on it, but to get boomer on it a little bit for me. These platforms are run by companies which make money based on having people interact with their platform. So they do everything they can to make you interact with it. And most of those things they do that like literally kind of forms an addictive path in your brain.
hmm
Like it doesn't reward it rewards like longer engagement for better or for worse.
hmm Those
It's,
push notifications, and
yeah.
they get you to comment, and then you say you slip up and say something in a comment. Somebody's gonna reply to that. And they're gonna
Mhm.
say something that doesn't make you uh, feel good or whatever. It's gonna
Yeah.
piss you off. And once you can connect emotion with that, they've
Mhm.
got you hooked. Once it's an emotional thing, you're done for.
It's also super easy to like say something, be misunderstood, and when you try and clarify the misunderstanding, you just go further in the pit. Like it's not you made a mistake or it's not you worded something incorrectly. It's that you're secretly bad and this is mask off moment. But
hmm
yeah, that's that's why I don't really bother with making content other than like recorded comedy and posting to an Instagram story that I look like a dykey Rambo. Stay tuned because when we get back, I'll be talking to Jaden about him, and I'm quoting here, being from the streets, dog. We'll be back. That was Redneck Shit by Wheeler Walker Jr. We were actually talking earlier about this being your first year up in Seattle a little bit. You can tell I'm reading from a script here. What's it like living away from home for like the first time?
Well, this is my first time living away from what I would consider home,
Mm.
but my transition to Seattle, I really loved it. Um, I've actually never been to Seattle until the day I moved up here. I just got into my car and started driving one morning, and then I showed up at college. Um, yeah, I wasn't able to do tours or anything up here,
Mm.
so I was just kind of jumping in feet first. Um, but I've really loved it up here. I really like how I've grown as a person since I've been here.
Mm.
My mind has gotten open to a lot more things.
Mm.
And when I went home for, I think it was Christmas break, I already saw like a huge difference between like me and how a lot of my like friends thought. And to
Mm.
think that I had the same worldview as them just months before that
Mm.
is really amazing to me.
Yeah. It's crazy how much like a mix of like the change of scenery, like being in college, being away from like it's a physical separation between like you and the old you, how much it like changes and like lets you feel different. Makes you different, not just makes you feel different, you know.
hmm
Yeah. I remember when I first like came up here from my strip mall hometown, which I'm working on a bit about it. It's basically a strip mall made up of other strip malls and everything closes by 7. But it was so different and like feeling that there are so many like opportunities, not like just like opportunities for the future, but just, oh, I can eat different kinds of food. I don't have to drive anywhere. I can just like be here either by myself or with people I choose and with people I haven't known since second grade.
hmm Yeah, that's exactly how I felt coming up here.
Mm,
I made a list of foods that I wanted to
mm,
try once I moved to Seattle, and I
mhm,
shared that list with somebody, and they're like, "Dude, like, you want to try like Seattle versions of this?" And I was like, "No, I've literally never had like Thai food before.
mhm,
Like, I don't even know what that is."
mhm. Well, we'll have to take you on the grand sweep. It'll be the the underground tour, the fucking needle, the Sam, and Thai food all in one. Just the most expensive way to spend 8 hours in the city. So how like other other than like the people, how does living in Seattle feel different from being in your hometown?
Oh, it's a complete 180 to
Mm,
polar opposites. The first big difference is it's kind of like a concrete jungle here.
mm,
I mean, there's some trees and there's like Lake Washington and some mountains in the background,
mm,
which is a little reminiscent of home. But like where I'm from, it's quite literally like forest surrounding and the town, but also like anywhere I'm going there's trees all about. I used
mm.
to walk through the forest to go to friends' house and stuff. Um, so the environment's just completely different. I'm still getting
Yeah.
used to living next to what I would consider a highway, but is really just kind of a main street in
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah, I would from my own experience, like I recently moved, well, last year, moved out of like university area into a house that's like more in the Stixy zone. Not barely sticks, but
Hmm.
just being able to like see a tree every day, to have greenery around, like it was such like a distinct uptick.
Hmm.
So please go find some. Like it's we weren't meant to
So
live on paved.
so far it hasn't really gotten me too down or
Mm,
anything. I actually really like the abrupt change and being in a
mm,
different environment, and I think that's part of like recreating myself and like
yeah,
finding myself. So I'm appreciating it so far, but eventually it might get old.
yeah. Like all things, it's all
Mhm.
in flux. You're never one thing all the time. So living away from your hometown also means like living away from family. How's that been for you?
Yeah, well, I was living independently of my family off and on before I
Mm,
graduated high school.
mm,
I have kind of a unique family situation,
mm,
uh, but I love some of the members of my biological family, but all of the members of my chosen family.
yeah,
So it's still um, kind of hard being away, but it's really doable for me because I talk to a lot of them on the phone. I still play
nice.
like video games with my friends, and I'm only a few hours drive away from back home, so I
Yeah.
can go visit them during breaks and stuff.
I'm in a similar situation where like the physical distance thing.
Hmm.
My hometown, I'll fucking say it's Lacey. It's right next to Olympia. It's like an hour drive away from here, which is the perfect distance. It's enough to feel like physically separated, but still like if you need to, you can go back.
Hmm.
And it means I don't have to find a new dentist. Comedians use family as a topic a lot. Do you see yourself doing that in the future at any point?
Well, actually, the first comedy set I ever wrote for Comedy Club was a set about my family.
Mm,
It was the first thing I ever shared. It was not all that good. You know, it was the first thing I'd written. And we talked about this a while ago about there's this pitfall of writing about families where it ends up just kind of becoming group therapy. You
yep.
just kind of talk about
Yep.
messed up things from your life, and if people also went through that trauma, they laugh.
Hmm.
Um,
Or
and
even
so,
just like if you say it with a smile, they might laugh
yeah.
and think
Uh,
about it later on.
so there's kind of a struggle to write sets about family that's not family style sets that doesn't rely on it just being funny because it's trauma, shared
Yeah.
trauma.
I talked
I
about this with Bean. Sorry to interrupt, but I talked about this
good.
exact thing with Bean a couple episodes back, where it's like, yeah, sometimes you just go up there and you realize you're just sharing sad facts, but you're smiling and you're indicating to the audience that they should be smiling too. But that doesn't mean
Hmm.
it's quite the best set.
Yeah, I think that if I found a really solid way to do it and I could perform that set with like comedy club, like at
Mm,
one of our meetings, and like get positive feedback from that, I would consider performing it in a show. But
mm.
I wouldn't set out for a show topic to do a whole thing about family.
Yeah. It's unlike being like, oh, it's a Valentine's Day show. Family is something that can go so heavy so fast. And I find that for material where I feel like not less stable, but attached to, distinctly attached to, where to the point where it's like, I don't know how well I can evaluate this attached to. I find Comedy Club to be like a great resource of that. Every Wednesdays at 6:30, meeting link in the Instagram, because we're able to like share that material and get feedback from people who aren't just going to rip you to shreds.
Right, show up during a work week to hear about our trauma.
Yeah. Well, that touches on another reason. Like, if that's the one way you learn how to process things, if that's the one way you learn how to like share and be open, it can be a cope for a little bit, but it shouldn't be a long
Mhm.
term one.
Something that I want to get into with writing sets about some of the crazier stories I have
Mm,
from growing up, because I didn't have very much a normal childhood.
mm,
And so I've got some weird and interesting stuff that I think deserves to be out there.
yeah,
But I'm still working on adapting that to, oh, it's not just a crazy story, it's a funny, crazy story.
yeah,
Because I was writing down something the other day and I was like, okay, I don't have a punchline in here for like a
yeah.
page and a half. It's just weird shit.
That's what I find myself falling into too. When I wrote about her fake name is Nancy. When I wrote about my roommate Nancy, uh,
Hmm.
I started with just like a list of all of the things she did, and I had to really pare it down and like figure out what was actually like funny out of context. But
Hmm.
so what I find is just like, I don't know if you get this, but I put a lot of like fear of failure when I write comedy alone, which is the dumbest thing ever, and I'm fully aware of it. Like, there are no stakes. No
Hmm.
one's gonna bust into my room when I'm writing and make fun of me for being bad at writing.
Hmm.
Zero
Yeah,
stakes.
I've done that a few times where I got out of the shower and I had thought of this really good
Mm,
bit in my head in the shower, and I was like rushing to write stuff down on the notepad, and I found myself not writing down one of the lines that I had thought of because I was like, I don't know if that's very good. I
mhm,
don't want to. And then I was going over the bit like a few weeks later, and I was like, this is kind of missing something. I had that
mhm.
idea, but I remembered what it was.
Yeah. Honestly, just like letting yourself word vomit and then cleaning it up later. The art's in the edit. We all know this. The art's in the cut is such a helpful technique.
That's something I kind of struggle with, is going
Mm.
back to previous writings and getting into like the same mindset I was in when I wrote
Oh
it.
yeah.
Because sometimes I can't interpret exactly my own writing, or I'll have
Mhm.
missed certain points that were like obvious in my head, but like didn't write it down. And
Mhm.
it's the same thing when you write like English projects and
Mhm.
stuff.
I for a long time I was like, I'll only write comedy if I'm in the right headspace. I'm doing a little princess hair wave for people who can't see me because it's an audio medium. But what I found is like you can kind of brute force yourself into a headspace. I feel dumb saying this, but I saw a fucking TikTok about motivation not being like the instigator, but motivation is momentum. So you just have to force yourself to start and then you build momentum. And then once you start and you look at what you've done, you're like, oh, I can keep going with this. So for a while over spring break, I would have like a Google Doc is where I do most of my writing, or like the notes app on my phone. I rarely write stuff like on paper because I have super bad handwriting.
Mhm.
But I would just like word vomit, sometimes just like repeat lines I had heard in the day, or like keep rewriting a single line of song lyrics until I felt like I had built enough momentum. It's like, okay, I can start doing comedy now. Just like getting in the zone.
Yeah, that's something that I had to try to learn to induce in myself. The first
Mm-hmm.
show that I ever performed in was the Halloween show, and I
Mm-hmm.
had signed up for it with this kind of good idea. And then I had written a few good lines, but I still had to write a lot more. And it ended up
Mm-hmm.
coming down to like the week before, um, like we had our meeting a week before. We ran through
Mm-hmm.
our stuff, and I shared some ideas, and they're like, "Okay, that's good. What else do you have?"
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm working on it. It's getting there.
It's in
And
the
then it was
works.
like the show was like on a Friday and it was a Wednesday, and I don't know if it was my ego or what, but I pictured myself. I don't know. I was looking at myself in like a third person, like I was
Mm.
in a movie or something, in like this superficial moment. Like I was beginning my rock star careers. Like I was, it was like I'm gonna look back on this when they make the documentary, when they make the movie for Netflix, and it kind of worked for me. And I just started
Mhm.
putting pen to paper, and I got some stuff written down.
I love that so much. Being like, I need to remember this moment so I can get the lighting correct in the scene that begins the montage. God, I think tangentially related to that, I think the first time I did like stand up at UW, my mom said, don't sign with Netflix, sign with HBO for the clout. Cute. Cute shit. I don't know. I don't have a lot of like, I don't want to use the word nefarious, but high school stories, because in high school I was rock bottom depressed, working a lot, and doing a lot of AP classes, which definitely contributed to the rock bottom depressed. Like I had
Hmm.
a whole year of high school where I did not put on jeans and I was just crying in the hallways a lot. Eventually that'll get integrated into a bit, but not soon.
Yeah. My high school experience, I don't know. A big theme at my high school is talking about how people wish they'd go to a different high school. Because we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's like 200 kids. My high school was actually a 7th through 12th grade building. So we have middle
Mm.
schoolers in there with
Mm-hmm.
seniors.
Woof.
Um, and I was lucky enough that I got involved in sports, so I
Mm.
was a sports person in high school. I wouldn't really define myself as a jock, but
Mm.
like, I had fun. Um, but I'm really lucky because my school didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. I didn't have to
Mm.
take a lot of opportunities. Like when UW holistically reviewed my thing, they're like, okay, he only did 2 extracurriculars, but they only offer 1.5 extracurriculars. Um,
You made your
and
own
one of the
club. Half a club.
yeah, uh, and so I'm really lucky for that. That if I would have gone to a huge major school where because they offer APs, I'd had to have taken
Mm.
APs. It would have been a detriment to how
Yeah.
fun high school was for me.
Honestly, so much of like my admittance to UW feels like luck. It feels like I took like the right summer program choice, whatever, and then someone made a little bit of a mistake. Like,
Right.
not that I didn't have the grades to get in, just to protect my clout for the radio listeners. I did another hair flip. You're welcome. Uh, but like, I did one space camp thing, and I like literally it was space camp. They locked us in the Air and Space Museum for a week and fed us like the museum food for a week. And they're like, design a rocket, go.
Man, that
You're a
sounds
bunch of teens.
awesome.
You know how to do this. We did not. I think our final project was just like, fuck it. We're going to send 3 different rockets, just a caravan. We're not going to send them back. Anyways, but I was admitted in the same year that like they cut admittance for in-state kids from 50% ish down to 15% ish. So
Wow.
we had a lot of people who thought they were going to go to UW in my school who did not get into UW and didn't have a backup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I my dream my whole life was to go to Stanford. I told
Mm,
everybody I was going to go to
mm,
Stanford. I told people in my family that's where I wanted to go, and they
mm.
said, you're not smart enough." Um,
And look at you now.
yeah, um, but I actually kind of a secret. I didn't even actually send my application to Stanford. I didn't get it done in time. I missed the date, and I was like, they're not admitting me now.
Yeah,
Uh,
King. Also, I am convinced that Stanford is a drawn out joke. Like, they admit 400 kids a year.
mhm.
Practical joke.
Yeah, and like 390 of them they have to admit because there's somebody's grandkid.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, so UW was just one of those schools. I actually, when I filled out my thing for the SAT, I think I had
Mm,
a substitute teacher help me who I was really close
mm,
with, and she was like, "You should pick a bunch of other backup schools."
mm,
And I was like, "Okay, sure. I'll apply to WSU. A
mm.
community college is okay. Me riffing on WSU." And she's like, "What about UW?" And I was like, I guess. I mean, am I really smart enough to go to UW? But I mean, I was foolish enough to think I could go
Yeah.
to Stanford. So, and then they admitted me, and like as soon as I got that admittance, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is actually where I wanted to go." I
Hmm.
didn't know I wanted to go here, but
Hmm.
I want to go here.
That's what I felt too. I sent out like a bunch of different applications. I think UW was my only in-state school, and the only
Hmm.
other school I got into was Boston University, which
Hmm.
like Boston University offered me for more financial aid, but it still cost more than UW with no aid. And
Hmm.
the reason I applied to Boston is like I had toured it with a friend, and I was like, "Oh, cool! They have a lazy river. That's it." They have a lazy river between the main school building and the morgue. Right below morgue, lazy river.
Hmm.
That's what they got from me. Like once I got to UW, I'm like, and like some things happened to me shortly after I got to college where I'm like, oh, I'm really glad I'm like in state, an hour away, like with some people I know, with at least like a place I know, and not like totally in the dark about things.
Yeah, and I didn't even consider that like when considered going here. I
Mm.
wanted to get away from my hometown,
Yep.
but
Yes.
I ended up in the perfect radius where I'm
Mm-hmm.
away and I'm distantly away, but I'm road trip distance. I can get there
Mm-hmm.
in a day, and that's really great, especially for the breaks. For anybody who doesn't go to UW, sometimes they don't let you stay in the building over breaks. Something I find completely disgusting.
Yeah, it was oh god, the last time I had to be picked up for a break. Um my mom popped a tire on the drive up. So it was just all of the RAs eating pizza like in the floor of Terry. And it was me waiting outside with like a Rubbermaid tub and my suitcases. They're like, her mom's gonna get here eventually. But I had to wait outside and just watch them through the glass eat their pizza.
That
Yeah.
was like me on the last day of YMCA camp. I was sitting
Mm-hmm.
there, and the person who was supposed to pick me up was like late as hell. The whole
Mm-hmm.
camp had cleared out, counselors were going home, and the two people like left there with me were like, "We really want to get out of here. There's a fat party going on. Like, are you in walking distance of your house? Like, maybe one of us could drive you." Then I remember nobody had even shown up yet, but they were just put me on a golf cart and drove me out towards the gate. And as we were driving out there, I saw my ride.
I like the plan of like, well, if we get him out the gate, he's no longer our responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It's very funny to me what they let happen in summer camp. I wouldn't know about like being left like long enough period of time for people to like get concerned. Never a good feeling. I remember once I was supposed to be like picked up from middle school and like walking distance, my house was 10 minutes away, but I was not allowed to walk.
Mm.
Why? Don't know. When I asked, hey, can I walk to school? It's 10 minutes away. My dad said, huh. Then didn't talk to me, printed out an article about girls being abducted in our neighborhood, slipped it under my door in the morning, and we didn't talk about it anymore.
Mm.
That was the conversation. So I just waited at the school for like 30 minutes for him to roll up and be like, yeah, I fell asleep.
Yeah, the weird thing about where I grew up was it's not like a normal small town where it's a small town but everything's there.
Mhm,
I had to go to a different town, the next town over to go to school.
mhm,
And so it was enough of a distance where you can't really walk there,
mhm,
because you'd also be walking along the side of like a highway.
mhm,
So you have to get rides back and forth, but it
mhm.
was like small town culture where, oh, these damn kids are too lazy, just ride their bicycles.
On the highway.
Yeah.
Just drift behind that semi truck. It'll break the wind for you. Like, I take it for granted every single time that I go back home where I'm like, oh, especially the university district, like, is so much more walkable and pedestrian forward. Like, I jaywalk in the university district all the time. I rule the road. They can hit me if they want. I hope it's a Jag. But whenever I go back home and I'm like, oh, it takes 2 minutes for these walk lights to go on. The cars are going very fast and they will hit me and not give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no sidewalks, everything's far.
Yeah, that's how it is. We have kind of a main drag going down, cutting through the town, and it's actually not like a highway, but like a state thing, going to a national forest. So we have tons of traffic from out of towners just speeding like 60 miles an hour up, past like the general store, and like you kind of look both ways and just run across the street.
Just go for it. Yeah. It's like classic small town when like the main or like the main activity it's like, do you want to go to the mall or do you want to go bowling or go to Target?
We have neither of those three things. I mean, I'm small town. We had, I think, 2,000 people technically, but that was basically like 1,000 of them lived out in the woods, and so they'd only technically got mail in our area. Is that how it kind of works?
Got it. You're hitting like commune levels. Reasonably sized commune. Good sized commune.
Technically, I didn't grow up in a town because it's unincorporated area. There's no town of where I'm from, so it's kind of an area in the woods where people live with a bunch of trailer parks.
You're a homesteader.
Yeah.
Not Annie Oakley, or Little Orphan Annie. Jaden, that's your name.
Yeah. It's weird though where I grew up because, like I said, we're out in the middle of the woods, but we have all of these trailer parks and stuff, and I live in a part where it's a bunch of people living close together, so it is kind of like a neighborhood. But my sister lives outside of town, kind of, and she calls where I live the ghetto, if there is any sort of ghetto where it's all just a bunch of white trash.
Yeah.
But it was growing up, I wasn't allowed to go to certain places, which were like the roads near the trailer parks, which is eventually like when I was like a teenager and I was like rebellious. That's where I made all my friends, was the kids who lived in the trailer parks. They were the cool kids. Their parents let them smoke pot in the house. But it's weird growing up with boomer culture, but also like conservative, aristocratic boomer culture, but then also like depravity, white trash level culture.
Like a mix of like waspiness.
Like, we use duct tape to fix things, but when we do it, we try to make it look nice. They just they go nuts. Camo duct tape. Degenerates.
Degenerates. Did you have to learn early? Do you have to learn how to drive early where you're from?
No, it was about 15 and a half. I got my permit. I mean, I'd been driving a long time before that, illegally and without my parents' permission. I started stealing the car young. I was in like 7th grade, 8th grade.
Well, Jaden, I've been a sting operator this whole time. Your parents set me up to you're going to not citizen's arrest over the Zoom. But you say 15 and a half wasn't early, but I got my license literally the week before I moved to college. Literally the week. Because I was fucking terrified of the road for such a long time. Like, literally, I would, like, freeze up and get, like, sick every time I had to think about driving. Not because of something that happened, but, like, the PSAs really worked on me. And, like, there was one experience in a fucking pep band of all things where, like, pep band happened, like, late at night on a weekday. We had to go. My parents didn't want to drive me, so there was this one high school girl who, like, she was older than me. I was gay and didn't know it yet, where I'm like, I'm really excited to be in a car with her, and I don't know why. She was going to drive me to pep band. And what I didn't know is that she planned on picking up, like, 5 other friends beforehand, and that she planned on drinking beforehand. Literally, we were, like, a couple miles away from my house when she was like, oh, yeah, I took, like, 4 shots of tequila before this. So I'm just, like, in the back of her little hatchback, all of her friends perfectly cool, perfectly okay. I'm just, like, quiet and tense and trying to think about not dying. And then the worst was like when she drove me home after that, after seeing her like drink during pep band, I didn't think to like call my parents or anyone else. I'm just like, well, I said I was going to get a ride from her, so I'm going to get a ride from her. If I die with my trumpet, I die with my trumpet.
Shit. Where I'm from, 4 shots of tequila is drivable. We might not cut you off till 6. That's yeah, that's reminiscent to me of recently I got into a car with a friend, and 5 minutes into it, just as soon as we got off of like the university area, he was like, by the way, I'm having a manic episode. 4 hours ago I woke up having visions from God. Um and so that was one hell
Okay.
of an afternoon.
That is a statement that needs to be preceded with like, now don't worry. Now hold
I
on.
was extremely worried. It was dangerous the whole point. We didn't realize until we were almost back home that his gas light had been on since before he even picked me up.
Cool. Very
Um,
cool.
it's a
Have you
story
ever
for
run
another
out of
time.
gas on the road before?
Yes, I have. I've ran out on my motorcycle.
Oh no.
I was riding back home. I went somewhere the weekend before that. I had a long
Hmm.
trip, and I figured, oh, I have a little bit enough to go where I wanted. And I was going around the corner in the forest, and it died in the middle of the corner. And I was like,
No.
this isn't weird. Um, and so I just kind of like sat there for a minute trying to get it started, and I'm like, I am screwed. Luckily enough for me, I was traveling uphill, so I coasted it downhill enough of a ways, and then I ended up near somebody's house who I knew, but I wouldn't call him a
Okay.
friend. And I
Yeah.
kind of rolled up there, and where I'm from, you have to announce very well before you get onto someone's property that you're not a threat. So the whole time I'm walking with my hands up and trying to speak very loudly, hello, hello, is anyone there? And so I ended up getting some help. I put some gas in it and made it
Mhm.
home. But it was a rough time.
That could go so sideways so fast.
I was very lucky.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're alive, but my run out of gas story is less spooky than that, less literally horror movie act 1 than that. I was driving, or my roommate was driving. They had just bought this little like Miata that they're like, I bought this Miata for $500 off the side of the road from someone who was also selling oranges. I don't know how much of that's true. I like the story, so I'm not going to question it. But so they have driven the Miata up from like Kent, and you're driving around for a long time. Whatever. It's like a little convertible, but like the convertible part doesn't fully go up or fully go down. Like the back window's busted if you drive around too hard. Like water dumps down on the passengers, like feet from somewhere in the car. Whatever, it was a vehicle. But we were about to like get on the highway after touring the house we're currently living in, right? And their car just stops like a couple, like half a mile away from the highway on ramp. Their car just stops and they're like, oh, I forgot you needed gas. I just forgot that cars required gas because a Miata is basically a butterfly with 4 wheels. It weighs nothing and can go not 100 miles, but 98 without a fill up.
A friend of mine in high school had a Miata, and I think it was Christmas. Generally, a lot of redneck shit goes on during Christmas because the police kind of give us a pass. It was like the one day of the year I knew I could go drifting my 4-wheeler on the highway.
Merry Christmas.
And he was doing donuts in some parking lot in the Miata with the top down while it was snowing. And I remember that as like it was one of the most iconic moments watching that happen.
Uh,
It's like I
that's
love where
definitely
I'm
going in
from.
your movie.
Yeah.
There's got to be some Act 1 hometown boy stuff. And then there's Act 2, the classic art movie where you like do your montage, you make it big, you get obsessed on fame. Act 3, something I'm going to assume tragic happens. Let's
Mhm.
say I'm casting your cards. I have a tarot deck. I won't whip it out for you now because I don't know how. I'm saying Car accident feels too tropey. Let's do you get a private pilot's license and you land at sea, but like the middle of the sea, somewhere near the Mediterranean. I don't know how a comedian's life would lead you there. You get
Seems
stranded.
probable.
Yeah, you don't know Italian. It's a little bit of a comedy. I'm getting too far into this. I'm writing up a fucking treatment right now. I should know I've taken one cinema studies class.
I took one of the weirdest electives my school ever had was we had like a film criticism class, which is not something
Okay.
you expect some podunk town in the middle of nowhere to have. But I was like a junior. I was like, sure, I'll
Mhm.
take this class or whatever. Ended up being nothing but like freshmen and sophomores, and I was just some junior in there looking 35 because for the people listening at home, I have a beard, a very large beard. I've
Mhm.
had that since I was 12. Um, but I actually met one of my high school girlfriends in that class. She was like a sophomore. She was like too old to be in the sophomore class. It wasn't a
Mhm.
very big age difference. Um, and that I thought that film criticism class is weird and obnoxious. But
Mhm.
she ended up turning out to be way more weird and obnoxious that class was.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with people who are into film crit. Like, I'm into film crit. I know I can be fucking terrible about it, but there's some people who are just like terrible about it in general.
Mhm.
You gotta be careful. I have one friend who absolutely like swore off. It's like, I will never on my life, not ever, date another film studies major. Their tights is obnoxious, but their type is not that color of obnoxious.
I admire people with the balls to major in something like film criticism and
Mm,
arts. Not to put them down or anything, but I really admire these people because
mm,
they're really just going, you know what, this is what I want to do, and I'll
yeah,
worry about like trying to figure out a way to monetize this later.
mm-hmm.
Um, and
It's a
I could never
scary
do
thing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm college is like the stock market for me. I'm just trying to put my 2 cents in, get my 20
Mm-hmm.
million out.
Get some low risk bonds and invest in over a long period of time. No
Hmm.
Deutsch, no Deutsch cone here. I think for me, cryptocurrency is one of those like inherently funny topics where I'm like, all money's fake.
I know two people who are into cryptocurrencies. One of my
Mm.
friends who literally spends, I think he's up to half of every paycheck now investing into cryptos. Don't worry, he doesn't make very much. And my high school English teacher, who he taught like senior year civics, and so he
Mm-hmm.
was like, as soon as you turn 18, I'm going to give you a lecture on why you should buy cryptocurrency. Until you turn 18, I can't mention anything about it, but like on your birthday, pamphlets about Bitcoin. He's always talking about like, oh, I'm trying to bid on this GPU to like upgrade my Bitcoin mining machine. And I'm like, it it's like people should really make fun of that fandom. Just
Yes,
like
it's so rich.
people make fun of like astrology girls and stuff, but
Mm-mm.
like
What is the
Bitcoin
stock
bros.
market but astrology for men? Some classic fucking TikTok queer humor, and you know what? I'm here for it. Like,
Mhm.
Bitcoin and crypto has always given me, like, I'm super into creatine powder energy. Like, I'm meal prep, and that meal prep is just a chicken breast and brown rice.
Mhm. That's
Just.
accidentally what I had for lunch today, but I promise I'm not a gym bro.
It's
Um,
different when it's all the time. You know what I mean?
yeah. Um, uh, yeah. Money to me is just a means of getting that cabin in the woods and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want that suburban house and the
No.
kids in the minivan or any of that crap
Mm-mm.
or the
Mm-mm.
loans and the mortgages. Um, no, I just
I'm good without it. I had one friend who I worked with him for a long time, and I love this dude. He like worked at a place where boys and girls congregate, a union perhaps. Uh, I I still like this
Mhm.
place. So I don't want to like put him on blast. It's not even on blast, anyways. And he would constantly talk about like, yeah, I just want to buy some land and some goats and build my own house. Me and my goats
Mhm.
and no one else to tell me what to do. I'm just gonna sell whatever the goats make.
Mhm. I that idea hit me not but 2 hours ago. I was like, I should buy some land with the $2 in dining account funds I have to my name. And so I went on Zillow and I was looking for property outside of Seattle.
Ugh.
Um, and then I remembered property taxes are a thing. And I'm like, they're literally requiring me to continue to make money after I've already gotten the only thing I need to make money for.
It's a sham. It's a sham and a ruse and a fake
Mhm.
and a falsehood. I don't dip into Zillow. I can't. I still think it's really cute when my professor's like, when you own a house, you'll understand. One of my professors recently lectured from his vacation home. It's very cute for you. I will live in an apartment until I die. That's what the cards have for me.
I was listening to, I forget who it was, but it was like a pretty successful stand-up comedian
Mm-hmm.
talking about how they only rent, they don't buy,
Mm-hmm.
like still. And I was like, that's a really crazy idea. Why would you do
Mm-hmm.
that? It's a waste of money. Then they started going off about it, and I was like, hey, I mean,
Yeah,
toilet gets clogged up, call the guy, you
makes
know.
some good sense. Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening to UW Comedy Hour, and tune in next week at noon where I'll be talking to the woman who's one herb drawer away from becoming a plain walking witch, and my roommate, Bethany. Make sure you follow Rainy Dog on Instagram at RainyDawg for more great radio. Follow at UW Comedy Club on Instagram for show schedules, meeting links, and more. UW Comedy Club has meetings every Wednesday at 6:30 where there is no experience needed to have a good time. Keep listening to Rainy Dog Radio to hear Colin from the Funhouse with Bill Pepsi.